Welcome everyone, and thank you for attending today's Healthcare IT News webinar, 3 Ways to Improve Your Healthcare Applications Through IoT Connectivity, sponsored by Aeris and Mevia. My name is Mike Milliard. I'm the editor of Healthcare IT News, and I will act as moderator today. We look forward to your questions and comments, which you can submit at any time by accessing the question box on your screen, and we'll make every effort to answer your questions during the presentation's live Q&A at the end of the session. Today's healthcare markets are growing exponentially, and medical care services need to keep up with patients by providing real-time monitoring and communication. The Internet of Things allows healthcare companies to transform standalone products that were previously unconnected into connected devices that expand the abilities and effectiveness of their services. Connected IoT healthcare devices, when deployed on reliable networks, can greatly improve the quality of medical treatments. In contrast, a poorly executed connected solution will actually cost healthcare providers valuable time and money, especially when it causes disruptions in remote monitoring or real-time feedback. Consider some of these statistics. Businesses will spend $3 billion on the IoT ecosystem and deploy 11.2 billion devices by 2020. IoT deployments in healthcare will reach 117 billion by 2020, and the pharmaceutical market's revenue loss is expected to be $564 billion owing to medication non-adherence. Our speakers for today's webinar, Evan Whitelock and Jesper Hassel, will speak to those figures and more. Evan has worked at Aeris and in the IoT M2M space for more than 5 years. He currently leads product marketing efforts at Aeris, where he's responsible for product development, go-to-market strategies, and sales enablement. Prior to this role, Evan sold Aeris IoT solutions for more than 3 years, working directly with medium to large enterprises, as well as partners on the IoT solution design and implementation. Jesper Hassel is the CEO and co-founder of Mevia. His experience ranges from startups to management consultancy experience to offshore oil drilling. Having always lived and worked in international settings, he is now guiding Mevia in the challenging healthcare arena. He holds a Master of Science degree from Chalmers University of Technology in Gothenburg, Sweden. So now I'll hand it over to Evan to begin our presentation.
Thank you, Mike. And before I get started, I want to go ahead and ask you guys a poll real quick, just to get an understanding of where you guys are with your IoT plans, whether it's something that you haven't started planning or just getting started, or if you're as far as building your next-gen solution. So if you could go ahead and take a minute to answer this poll real quick, I'll give you about 15 seconds or so, and then we will get started. Okay. We look at the results here. It looks like most of you guys are really just kind of exploring your options, which is good, especially given the topic of what we want to talk about today. You know, how different IoT connectivity options can help improve healthcare solutions. That's certainly a good fit, and certainly will be some value as well for those that are just trying to figure out, you know, how IoT fits, as well as if you've already got a little bit of experience and gotten your hands dirty with some progress so far. So a good mix, but looks like we got the right audience today. So, well, you know, really what we want to talk about today, you know, one of the real reasons that IoT is, there's a couple of real reasons that IoT is really taking a hold, especially in the healthcare space, which is a space that we see has one of the largest ceilings in terms of growth potential with IoT. And there's several reasons why IoT is especially applicable to the healthcare space. And it starts with what IoT can do to improve healthcare efficiency. When you consider the solutions that are coming out, whether it's remote patient care or automated systems or analyzing the data that can be collected from patients to better understand trends in solutions, IoT offers the promise of making healthcare systems far more efficient. Even if it's a patient with a chronic condition that needs to communicate regularly with their doctor, by being able to take a connected IoT device home with them for a connected home healthcare solution, being able to transmit that data remotely to their doctor without having to make the in-person visits. For lots of patients, it's a challenge to even get to their doctor. So to be able to do that over the air or remotely makes that solution far more efficient. In looking more specifically at the healthcare providers and the solution providers in this space, there are obviously a lot of different medical devices out there, and the manufacturers of these devices are highly incentivized to adopt an IoT solution because of the recurring revenue that this solution enables. It allows these manufacturers to go from simply selling a device to now also selling a recurring service on top of that device, which is a more attractive business models for the providers in this space. And then lastly, certainly the ability for IoT to solve real industry challenges. In the second half of today's presentation, you'll be hearing from Mevia about how they have solved the industry's medical adherence problem with medication, and have done that through adopting IoT into their solution. So a great real-world example of how an IoT solution can really make a difference and solve some of the challenges that exist in the healthcare space. And before we jump in, I do want to give you just a little bit of background about Aeris and what brings us to this discussion today. So Aeris, we are an IoT solutions provider. Historically have focused on providing cellular connectivity to IoT solutions on a global scale. We're headquartered in Santa Clara, California, but we do have offices around the world, a second office and operations center in Chicago, another office right outside of London. Also, an office we opened up in India, and just last year we announced a joint venture in Japan with SoftBank, which we're very excited about. As a company, we're about 250 people. The vast majority, about 50%, focused in engineering and operations. We've kept that mindset towards innovation and really focus on that with the people that we bring in. We've been around since the early 90s, providing various forms of connectivity, even moving into the pre-cellular days of analog. But the same concept of using wireless technology to enable these IoT solutions, or formerly M2M solutions. So we leverage that experience with a lot of the solutions that we provide today. And to give you a little bit more context about our company and give you some numbers that might help make it a bit more clear, we've got over 8 million devices on our networks today, our cellular networks around the world, and that's actually up over 9 million now. It's constantly growing, and it's hard to keep up with the slideware. So that's over 9 now. All those devices combined in the systems that we support are processing over 1 billion IoT messages per day. Now that's everything from actual device transactions, sending data, but also information about what devices are doing on cellular networks, whether it be monitoring device activity, registrations, and so forth. Oftentimes information that customers use to troubleshoot their devices and whether or not they're communicating properly. Our global reach today is over 180 countries where we do have operations and have the ability to support deployments. And that over 9 million devices number, that actually puts us in the top 10 worldwide in terms of IoT units under management from a service provider standpoint. So hopefully that provides a little bit more clarity on Aeris and where we fit in the ecosystem. And now that we've got that out of the way, we can jump into the topics that we really want to cover today, which is, as you move, we covered the benefits of an IoT solution and what they can do for a healthcare. What they can do for the healthcare industry. We really want to talk about what are some of the challenges that you are going to face as you look to implement or evolve your IoT solution. And the 3 of the goals that you'll be looking for that really can help you achieve this, the right IoT solution is ways to create a better user experience, especially in the healthcare space where in many cases the user here is the patient. Who may not be able to be very technically savvy, or cannot rely on them to solve a complicated figure out a complicated device or installation or activation and so forth. So one challenge is how to create a better user experience for that user or for that patient. The other key challenge to consider is your operational costs by adding these IoT services, and how to keep those operational costs as low as possible. Certainly, one of the benefits to manufacturers in this space and providers is the ability to now start getting recurring revenue from these services. But how to make sure that those operational costs stay low so that the margin on those services is maximized is another challenge. And then third is global expansion. Certainly, there's plenty of opportunities, here in the U.S., but also as we're going to hear from Mevia the second half, there's a lot of global possibilities in these healthcare solutions. Can be well received, can be very successful on a global scale, and so how to achieve that global expansion is another challenge for to really get the most out of your IoT solution. So these are the three topics that we'll be talking about as we go through the rest of the presentation. Now, before we jump into it, one more thing I wanted to cover was the different types of technology that you can use to connect your IoT devices. Three of the more common ones are Wi-Fi, wired Ethernet, and cellular. And now there are many other different types, whether it be Bluetooth or Zigbee, especially with some wearable healthcare solutions, for example. For the purposes of today, we'll be focusing more on cellular and the types of solutions where the device you're connecting is sending you the information back that you're going to use. And the example of a wearable device, for example, it may be a watch or a heart monitor that could be tethered to a smartphone, for example, to provide that user information that they can digest and see. We're really talking more about the solutions that are going to send the information back to you as the provider for your application. And for those, typically a Bluetooth or a Zigbee is not going to get that information all the way back to you and your servers. It would need to be a Wi-Fi and Ethernet or cellular. And while Wi-Fi and Ethernet do present their benefits, mainly on the recurring cost side, they present some challenges as well. Certainly for Wi-Fi, in the cases of an in-home patient solution or a remote patient monitoring solution, that's going to require an activation process. As I had alluded to earlier, it's not always the case that somebody with a chronic condition, maybe they're elderly, for example, they may not have the technical wherewithal to figure out how to connect a device to their in-home Wi-Fi network. They may also not even have Wi-Fi. Not every household here in the U.S. and certainly global is set up with the infrastructure to support Wi-Fi or even wired Ethernet. So without knowing at the time of installation or setup, you may not know if there is actually an internet connection available at that site. And in the case of hospitals or other locations like that, for example, there may be problems with congestion or access to that local network, where maybe the hospital doesn't want to expose their network to additional devices or additional systems. There's no way to guarantee that that's a closed and isolated environment. And the only real way to do that, especially on a global scale, is cellular. So that'll be the focus of our discussion today, simply because of the more universal nature of cellular networks. And we'll stop here for one more quick poll. So if you could take a second to answer this one. Just what kind of, for those of you that are exploring an IoT solution or already have one maybe, what kind of communication, what kind of technology have you used for your solution? So I'll give you a couple seconds here to answer that question, and we'll take a look at the results here shortly. Okay, now we'll take a look at the results real quick. So it looks like a good chunk of you have explored using homeowner Wi-Fi or homeowner internet. And again, certainly there's some benefits there, especially with the cost there if you can piggyback on some of those networks. What we have seen though is that it can be very difficult to scale that solution. It can be very difficult to manage that solution. Certainly in the case where if a homeowner perhaps changed their Wi-Fi passwords or got a new provider, or maybe they needed to punish their kids for not focusing on schoolwork and they took away the internet from them during the week. If they changed that password, then that device would lose connectivity. Not surprised that satellite isn't a major one today, although that does have some benefits. And it looks like also a decent chunk of you have not picked the technology yet. So hopefully today provides a little bit more clarity on that topic for you. But a good mix of results there. Okay, so when we look at that first challenge that we talked about, how to create a better user experience, there are several things to consider. Ultimately, the best user experience is going to come from a connection that's most reliable. One of the things you're going to want to consider when picking a cellular technology or a wireless technology option is what has the highest combination of coverage and uptime. Coverage, obviously, because if there is no connection there, the device is not going to be able to communicate. But uptime is also important because when that device goes down, if there is a network issue or if there's a connectivity issue, then that customer is having a very poor customer or user experience. Not only that, specifically to the healthcare space, a lot of these solutions are very mission critical in that these devices have to be transmitting in very important information about that customer. If the device is not it doesn't have a reliable connection, then it almost defeats the purpose of what it's trying to accomplish. So what we've seen is that cellular is really it achieves that balance of highest combination of coverage and uptime simply because it is truly global, given all the operators around the world and the towers that have been set up. Even in areas where there isn't existing infrastructure, other infrastructure in place, even in some developing countries, they skipped landlines and went straight to cellular infrastructure. So from a global standpoint, cellular is a very reliable option and gives you that balance of coverage and uptime. The other benefit of most cellular solutions is that they come with a connectivity management platform, which is if you are considering looking in the direction of cellular or exploring an option, that is one thing that you definitely want to try to find is somebody that gives you a platform that allows you to control that connection and manage it. The connectivity management platforms typically give you the ability to activate devices, manage rate plans, suspend devices, for example. But more importantly, where it can make the biggest difference for the user experience is the platform's ability to allow you as the owner of that connection to resolve issues faster. Troubleshooting tools so that if a device is not connecting properly, you can understand via usage reports and network activity if it's connected to a network, if it's trying to send data, if it's not sending data. Troubleshooting tools such as a clear registration, for example, which will kick a device off the network and then it's programmed to automatically re-register. Same concept as when you unplug your internet modem at home, wait 3 seconds, plug it back in. With wireless devices, just the act of re-registering on the network solves so many issues. And so the ability to resolve issues on behalf of your customer is one major benefit of a cellular connection over some of the other available technologies. And then ultimately, the ease of use of your IoT device, especially in solutions where the end user is a patient, making it as easy as possible for that customer to use that device without having to go through any lengthy activation steps, not having to call a number to get the device set up, being able to make that device work out of the box. And one thing you'll see with a cellular connection along with the platform is how that can be automated, how that supply chain can be automated, which is what we're gonna cover right now. So during the supply chain, what you want to look for with cellular and with providers that do have a connectivity management platform is the ability to provide customers pre-activated devices. Now, how this can work and how this works with our systems is that when we have customers, we send them SIM cards that are going to connect to that device, be inserted into that device to run the cellular connectivity. We'll have that SIM card pre-configured in our system so that when the customer receives it, it's already programmed and it's shipped live. Now, what our customers can do during their own supply chain is actually test that device to make sure that it's working properly. We have something called the provisioned state, which is effectively an activated but non-billable network state for that SIM card. So customers can insert the SIM card into their device, test it, make sure that it's working. Make sure that when it gets to the end user and it gets shipped to their house and they pull it out, that device has already been activated, it's already been tested, and there's no additional activation step needed, which ensures the working out of the box functionality. Now, how it also works is the platform and the rate plan is built with preset data threshold triggers, say 5 kilobytes or 10 kilobytes or whatever you need for testing. Then when the customer receives the device out of the box and starts using it, naturally the activity will exceed that threshold, and the device will automatically flip into a billable state and resume its normal connectivity charges. And again, all automated so that the end user doesn't have to call any numbers or go through any extra activation steps. Now, going beyond just the work out of the box functionality, this same concept can be applied later on in the device's life cycle. For example, if for whatever reason you need to suspend a device, if a patient had a temporary condition and that the patient was cured, that device can be returned, can be suspended so that you're not paying any connectivity charges while it's not in use, refurbished, and then sent back out to a new customer, a new patient that needs that solution, all while saving costs when that device is not in use. Also, the ability to cancel service when a device is no longer needed. And then reprovisioned if it does need to sit on a shelf for longer than 6 months. If you need to cancel it and then reactivate it for another customer down the road. All different tools that are available via a cellular connectivity management platform that you should look for when trying to map out your supply chain, especially on a global scale. Now we want to jump into the next topic, which is how to reduce operational costs. Certainly a major factor when building out an IoT solution, and especially if you move from an unconnected device to a connected IoT solution, that's going to come with additional charges, connectivity costs and so forth, operational costs that you hadn't had before. That's one of the bigger challenges to figure out is how to move in that direction while keeping your costs low. And one of the ways to do that is by increasing your operational efficiency. This, again, is going back to the ability to have a connectivity management platform, which, especially on a global scale, is only achievable with a cellular connection, which will empower your operational staff to identify issues faster and then go back, as I mentioned before, resolve those issues faster. For example, the ability to set proactive alerts around data usage, both minimum and maximum. So so you can ensure that a device does not have a firmware bug, let's say, and it sends 10 times more data than it's supposed to. That can be a lot of money via overage charges that you weren't anticipating or planning for, that you want to avoid by being able to set an alert so that you get notified on the 4th of the month that the device is about to reach its monthly limit. You can go look into that device, resolve the issue to minimize the damage and overage charges. And then on the other side is the minimum alert I had mentioned. If a device is supposed to send information at least once a day, say that information comes out to 100 kilobytes or 1 megabyte or whatever it is, you can set a daily minimum alert so that you get notified if a device did not do what it was supposed to on any given day. That's going to allow you to look into that device. If there's an issue, you can even call the patient proactively and say, you may not have realized, but it looks like your device is having an issue. I just want you to know we're already working on it. So then again, that ties back into a better user experience for the customer and the end patient. That also helps with the cost controls. Again, a major part of connectivity management platforms are the ability to control costs. Again, with the proactive alerts to identify those issues faster, the troubleshooting tools to get those resolved faster. And then also, if you do have devices with multiple rate plans, for example, you can manage those rate plans so that your costs are optimized. If you need to repurpose a device and it's going to send more data, you've got flexibility to plan that out. And then as I just touched on with the previous graphic, the supply chain and the cost that can be saved there. It's not just the functionality of being able to have devices work out of the box, but all the money that you save when that device is in that provision non-billable state, for example. If you test it at your manufacturing facilities, you ensure that it's working, and then say it's going to be another 5 to 6 months as it goes through your distribution channel before it flips billable and you start getting revenue on that. You can save those 5 to 6 months worth of connectivity charges while it's in that provision state. So your supply chain can be optimized not just from a functionality for the end customer so that it can work out of the box, but also for your production costs can be minimized with platform capabilities. And then the last challenge that we'll touch on is once you've built out a proven and successful model and you've achieved a solution that has a great user experience, the patients are very happy, the providers are very happy, and it's making a material difference in their lives. And you structured the solution in a way that that your costs are controlled and that it's profitable for you, and the recurring revenue services that you're getting from this new IoT solution far offset the operational costs of adding connectivity to your solution. What next? How do you expand globally? And if you were to deploy on a different technology, a cellular, Wi-Fi, or Wi-Fi or an Ethernet or so forth, that can become a challenge when you start looking at global expansion. Simply because, as I have mentioned before, without actually getting to a deployment site or getting to a residence or getting to a hospital, you may not know what connectivity options are available to you. So you may have to do some guess and check work. You may have to send somebody out ahead of time, which, especially on a global scale, can become very challenging to manage, and especially challenging to manage at a low cost. One of the major benefits of a cellular solution is the seamless global coverage that it can give you. That single subscription that could, a global roaming SIM, for example, could have access to over 500 carriers in over 190 countries without any extra programming changes or any of that. So that device can go from your manufacturing facility to anywhere in the world, and where there's cellular coverage, which is in most places certainly where people are. And it'll be seamlessly managed or seamlessly available without having to manage multiple SKUs, without having to manage multiple different types of offerings or different network technologies and so forth. Then on top of that, when the SIM cards are, when the devices are going to go globally, how do you make sure that you have a consolidated view as to what they're doing out in the field? Getting back to the need for connectivity management platforms, which are available with cellular networks, which are typically not available with other networks. How do you manage what those devices are doing? How do you make sure that your devices that are in Europe are behaving the same way as your devices in China and the same way as your devices in the United States? That the usage is consistent, the user experience is consistent, the product's reputation is inconsistent, and your costs are consistent. By using those tools, the alerts, the troubleshooting, the reporting, to have that consolidated view as to what devices are doing on a global scale means that you're always going to be in control of how they're performing, how you're troubleshooting them, and how much they are costing you. And then certainly, last but not least, is the security element that you need to consider when planning for a global deployment. If you were to strictly rely on some of the more open technologies, such as Wi-Fi, maybe it's public networks, you don't know who else is accessing those networks. We have seen examples with other IoT solutions that were accessing a public Wi-Fi network that some other hacker was able to get into, and a hacker was able to hack a system because they were both using the same public Wi-Fi network. So the point is that you don't always know what else is going on that network. Cellular is the only solution that truly is closed off from a security standpoint on a global scale. With private APNs, locked SIM cards, VPNs, static IP addresses, non-dialable phone numbers. Those types of features are what you should be considering when thinking about the security aspects of your solution, especially given the highly regulated nature of healthcare solutions and improving adherence to whether, here in the United States, HIPAA compliance or other local regulatory medical compliance regulatory compliances that you'll need to adhere to. An increased secure connection can go a long way in making it easier to achieve that. So certainly on a global scale, the single subscription globally is available with a cellular network, and something to definitely consider when planning your success on a global scale. And so just to recap very quickly, three of the challenges that you're going to certainly face when looking at your IoT solution and how to take it, how to become successful with your implementation and your expansion. Step number one is to create a better user experience. And as you saw, the tools that are available, the platform capabilities that come with a cellular subscription help you create a better user experience via the reliability and the out-of-the-box functionality that you can achieve. Second is reduction in your operational costs, keeping those as low as possible so that you can maximize the revenue that you're getting from these new services. Done by using platform capabilities to control, to identify problem devices before they become negatively impactful to your costs, managing those devices so that you can keep your costs low, and then fixing them as quick as possible so you can get back to happy customers and ongoing revenue. And then certainly the global expansion, which is the last piece. When you built that successful solution, how do you take it to the global market in a seamless and scalable way? And that's really by using a single subscription that you can deploy on a global scale while you maintain that control over how the networks are being used and how secure those networks are. So with that, and I think that's a good transition into our next presenter, Jesper Hassel from Mevia, who we are very excited to partner with. You're about to see their solution, which is a phenomenal solution that is really addressing the issue of adherence in the medical space, and he'll be speaking to his solution and how he's been able to be, how they are being successful on a global scale. So with that, I'd love to hand it off to Jesper to take over.
Thank you, Evan, and thanks for the kind words as well. So just a bit of background about us as Mevia as well. Obviously, we're not quite the size of Aeris at the moment. We're a pretty small team based and headquartered in Gothenburg, Sweden, so in Europe. And essentially what we're all about is we're about helping patients take the right dose at the right time. And I think from everyone who has a background within sort of medical aspects of anything, we try to utilize this quote, which essentially then mentions that improving adherence would have a greater impact on health than any potential discovery in medicine, which is what the World Health Organization states. And in essence, what that means is that if you as a patient aren't actually taking your medications, then they're not going to have an effect. And this is something, which was mentioned earlier as well, is that it is an insanely huge problem for obviously the healthcare payers, for the pharmaceutical companies, and not to mention the least that it's for the patient as well to help them actually be successful in their medical treatment. And as we can see, there's a number of aspects and issues. If we take sort of the pharmaceutical side, so if you're a representative from that area, there is the aspect of the lowered revenue. So because patients aren't then taking the right amount of pills and they're taking 1.8 pills instead of 2, of course you're losing quite a bit of revenue. And the issue here as well is that if you're a pharmaceutical company, if you're a Pfizer, and you have a drug on the market and it's not working for your patient, most patients when they're in contact with their doctor will actually indicate that they are being adherent to the regime. In some cases because they're not entirely aware of the regime, and in some cases because as an individual usually don't sort of acknowledge the fact that you might not be 100% compliant with your medications. And what we also see from a pharmaceutical aspect of it is that the average adherence in clinical trials and studies, so that's the development of new pharmaceuticals, that you go through a number of different testing phases which are extremely expensive for the pharmaceutical companies, and even in these tests they're not 100% aware of how patients are actually taking their medication, which provides big issues, and obviously there's a risk of pills reaching the market that shouldn't be on the market because they don't have the right effect, and vice versa as well, that there's a number of pills that are put down during the trial periods which should have gone through in the right sort of circumstances for the patient. And as mentioned earlier as well, there's the massive cost of adherence. So if we're looking at the U.S., it's around $300 billion spent on just taking care of adherence issues, and in long-term studies, the average is about 50%. And we're seeing this, in the studies that we do as well, that in general adherence levels do drop quite a bit, and then we can obviously help increase that. But just as well to sort of engage everyone here, you've been listening to us for quite some time, and I'd just like to ask if anyone who's listening, if you've ever utilized anything connected to help with adherence. And as Evan, I'll give you about 15 seconds to answer this as well. Okay, great. And if we sort of look at the results here as well, most are probably as the rest of the world as well have not utilized adherence technologies previously. A couple of you have, and obviously a couple that are about to. So it's we're obviously more than happy to speak to everyone after the calls as well. So it gives me a little bit of background to sort of that most aren't sort of familiar with the technology and what's possible to do as well. And as we move forward here, I'll sort of go into kind of what our technology is all about. In essence, what we do is we have a printed ink. So it's a conductive traces that we utilize. So on these three packages that you can see, the top one is something called pill packs, or pill pouches rather. And as you tear off each one of these bags, you break a trace. And these are multi-dose packages. They're available in the US and in Europe as well from pharmacies. The second here is essentially a pill dispenser. So it's also a multi-dose solution. So it's dispensed at pharmacies. You'll have different versions of it all across the globe. And the third one at the bottom is essentially just these blister packs. So the traditional one with pills and then back of the aluminum foil. So as you push out your pills or as you sort of tear off a bag, we register that. And what we do is we have a device that connects to these conductive traces. And this is the device itself is obviously patented globally, and this is where Aeris comes in as sort of the SIM card supplier here, and makes us able to actually get all the information that we need into our system. And the device then it sends this information into our database. And essentially, what we've done with the database is that we've taken away as much of the patient information as possible. As anyone working on the regulatory side realizes that sending data across and in different countries is pretty much of a challenge when it's just personal data. When it comes to patient or medical data, it becomes a lot more challenging. So what we've done is we've scaled off a lot of that. And we send that data through the cellular network into our database. And on that end, we can then also sort of connect that to other IT systems. But essentially, we have a pretty basic sort of web platform that you can log in and kind of see adherence levels over time. And then from our system, we then can communicate with the patients through a number of different ways. As Evan sort of mentioned earlier as well, is that a lot of the patients and the users might not be that tech savvy. And we've had tests with 90-year-olds in sort of the testing areas, and obviously they haven't been utilizing smartphones. Some of them haven't been able to read text messages. So what we've done in those instances is provided automated phone calls. So essentially what happens is we get the information in from the packages, and then we get that into our system. And depending on what we've gotten in, then we can obviously either alert the patient, alert relatives, or alert doctors or physicians or nurses that are connected to the patient that this patient needs help with whatever aspect of their medication it is. If we take a look kind of just on a little bit more of a zoomed up image of the web platform, what you can see here is these sort of lines of demo data, obviously not allowed to show any real data here. But what you can see is kind of the gradual over time and how everything looks. And then you can see that on a patient level as well, so that you as a user or as a relative can go in and see kind of the orange dots where they are, the green lines obviously where you're meant to take a medication. And then over time you see if you have drug holidays or if you're adhering to your regime as well. And essentially the system itself obviously becomes interesting for one part, which is then the pharmaceutical companies. And this is, the likes of Pfizer and Astra and Novartis, where it's really a system which is, mainly interesting from a perspective of market research and at the moment niche orphan drugs. And this is obviously the adherence is an issue across basically all medications. But when it comes to the solutions or the type of solutions that we at Mevia have, of course, there is a cost associated with it. And that's, one of the aspects which Evan mentioned as well, is that these type of technologies, they're not going to be free, but the value that they provide is quite drastic. So it's essentially within slightly more expensive drugs, it becomes a lot more interesting from a pharma perspective, at least, to support that. So if Pfizer loses one of their clients on one of their more expensive drugs, then that's a pretty big loss of revenue for them. And in essence, they have to provide certain market research towards legislation to be able to have their drugs on the market. And then, of course, that's also one of the aspects where there is a lot of interest for our type of solution. The other aspect and the other type of customer that we're working with is those that provide clinical research organizations, so the likes of Quintiles and Parexel and so on. And what they're doing is then obviously clinical trials and market research studies for these pharmaceutical companies. Essentially, what we can help with here is that because we can increase adherence, you get better data from your actual trials, and you're actually able to provide a higher power in regards to having fewer patients in your trials. So in essence, what it means is that you can test on fewer subjects or patients and get the same kind of result, which is obviously better for the public and society, that you're testing on less people but getting better effect and making sure that drugs that are working get onto the market, and drugs that aren't, that they are not entering the market. And the last type of route of customers that we're working with is pharmacies and insurance. So from a pharmacy's perspective, of course, if you have multi-dose and multi-pill pack type solutions, then what you can provide for your users is obviously a more catered solution, which allows you to get a lot better contact with your patient and obviously brings them into your pharmacies. And for insurers, there's the overall healthcare costs. So about 10% of all hospitalizations are due to mismedication or something wrong with your medication. And if you can, as an insurer, can ensure that your patients are adherent, the risk of them going to hospitals and requiring really expensive treatment, is drastically reduced. So this is another area where we're going into. And I think one of the major aspects, if we go into why people kind of work with us and so on, is essentially the safety and ease of mind. As Evan was mentioning as well, we are on sort of the cellular network, so the startup is extremely easy, and we can work essentially anywhere straight away, and you don't have to be tech savvy to actually be able to utilize it. We're 100% adaptable, so we design and cater to each primary packaging. So from a pharmaceutical perspective, the primary pack is what's directly in contact with the medication, and we're then a secondary pack, so we are an added layer and aren't actually in contact, which means our manufacturing process is pretty simple, but it also means that the pharmaceutical companies and the pharmacies don't have to change anything in there, so we dock into sort of existing systems. The other aspect as well is that we offer real-time data, and real-time data for real. There's a lot of the other solutions, such as Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and so on. It's really difficult to know if everything along the line are actually working. In our case, we can see exactly when or if a device stops working. We can make sure that it restarts, and we know exactly that entire aspect of it because we have direct contact with the actual device. And then the last aspect of it is that it's pretty simple information that we're providing, which is essentially timestamps of how and when you're taking a medication, and we're able to integrate that into other systems. We've done that in the UK and are looking to do it in both Canada and the US as we move forwards. As I mentioned from the start, we're a pretty small company still in Gothenburg, so we haven't been able to do everything that we'd like to do yet, but we're moving towards it. And I think that's to summarize essentially where we're heading. The reasons why companies have worked with us previously and what we're looking for is essentially what I mentioned there: the complete flexibility, the aspect of actually reducing patient dropouts, and then reducing the overall clinical trial costs as you sort of move forwards. From a patient perspective, what we've seen and what we've heard is essentially that it's becoming extremely difficult for patients to forget to take their medication as we are being supportive. And with our system, we can be both the really nagging type of parent, or we can be the supportive one. In essence, saying that if you're meant to take your medication at 8, we can send out reminders prior to you taking your medication, and then we can send reminders up until you actually take it. And for some individuals, that's appreciated. For some, they get quite annoyed by it. But we can set that on an individual basis. So if you're the type of individual that is pretty adherent but forgets sometimes, then obviously we can be passive. we get the data from our devices in real time. So if you take it at 8:10, then we won't send a reminder at 8:15. But if you haven't taken it by 8:15, then we can send a SMS or a phone call reminder and keep you updated. And in essence, I think that's a short sort of summary of what we do. And I'd like to sort of open the stage as well and invite back for any questions as well. And essentially, I hope that you've enjoyed and liked sort of what you've heard so far.
All right. Thanks very much, Jesper, and thanks, Evan, for a really informative presentation. We do have time for a few questions and already have some lined up, so let's get to it. First off, someone's wondering, in rural areas, it seems that cell service obviously varies greatly. So what are some of the best solutions for rural healthcare facilities who might have patients that live in those areas?
Yeah, this is Evan, and I can take that question. So it is true. While cellular on a global scale is, certainly in most residential or urban areas it's commonly deployed, but it obviously does not cover every corner of the globe. And this is something we've seen. We have a team here at Aeris that's specifically focused on helping companies in the social sector. In a bunch of solutions we've seen are in in the healthcare space for remote areas, especially in developing or third world countries, and that is a challenge. My recommendation would be, and this is something that if you were to reach out to us, we'd be happy to take a closer look at exactly where you're looking to go and what solutions are available. But it is possible to achieve a multi-technology deployment. And even managed on a single platform. So if it, incorporating additional technologies that are non-cellular, maybe it's satellite, or if there is Wi-Fi or other infrastructures in place, to be able to add those to the connectivity management platform for a consolidated view, not just across countries, but also across technologies, that is certainly possible. So again, if you do have more, if you'd like to get more information on that and what we could do there, you can feel free to reach out to either of the names that are up on the screen there, and we'd be happy to provide more information, more specific to your specific needs, what we could do there. So,
Evan, another question for you. How long will GSM service be available?
Mm-hmm. Great question, and this is something that's very it's a hot topic in the IoT world. Especially given that at the end of 2016, AT&T they have already shut off their 2G network. When you look at, and this is something that other carriers are moving towards as well, because they want to reharvest their spectrum that they have for all of us in our smartphones, which have a demand for more and more data and Netflix and video and YouTube and all that. And so we want our LTE connections, and so that's one of the main drivers for the reharvesting or the shutdown of existing older 2G networks, which unfortunately for IoT solutions has a bit of a negative impact, especially considering that a lot of IoT solutions don't need the bandwidth of an LTE solution, and 2G was fine for them. So when we look at 2G on a global scale, it's really region specific as to how long it's going to be around. I mentioned, here in the U.S., there's already increased pressure on 2G networks, and they are starting to disappear. As I mentioned, AT&T has already shut down their 2G network. T-Mobile is the other major GSM provider in the United States, and while they have not made any specific claims about or promises or given any specific deadlines regarding their 2G network, it's generally anticipated that it will be around for the next couple years, but probably not too far into the 2020s. And so it's, a lot of customers we see are looking at additional technologies that maybe have a longer lifespan. However, though, that's not the same throughout the rest of the world. In Europe, for example, it's expected that 2G networks will be around at least until the middle of the next decade, so into 2025 and potentially beyond. And in other parts of the world, it's expected that 2G networks will be around longer, around that time frame as opposed to the U.S. time frame. So it can depend, region specific, and if anybody would like more information, if they are more interested in a specific region, we'd be happy to provide a little bit more information there. So,
Jesper, we have a question for you. Someone's wondering, have you implemented the solution yet, and so what have been the results?
Yeah, thanks. We have implemented in a number of different situations. So I'll see if I can get one slide up of some of the users that we've had in the system. So this is a test we did in Sweden, in Gothenburg, with an elderly group, and this is an elderly home. And here you have sort of a picture of the dose bag solution as well, and you can kind of see the device sitting in the center of the bag. And what we tried to do here was essentially help the personnel and the patients themselves as well to then obviously adhere better and to minimize the amount of medical deviations that we had. And we realized during the test that we managed to minimize the medical deviations by 45%, looking at sort of the period previously, and with and without our sort of help. Now, obviously, we might not be able to say that 100% of this is because we're sending reminders and so on, but just the fact that you have a system and you get medical adherence higher on your in sort of your mind means that you're obviously better at following it. We also had a larger test with one of the big German pharmaceutical companies, and there we got continued feedback from the users that they weren't able to miss their medications, and we saw that their adherence levels actually increased as well. So it has been implemented both in Sweden, tested in the UK, in a lot of Europe. We've had some devices in the US as well, and that's again connected to the fact that we have global roaming devices that are able and do work in all across the globe. In regards to sort of Evan's comment there as well on the 2G and 3G and 4G networks, at the moment we're sitting pretty safe in Europe, and obviously looking at, together with Aeris, what we can do across the rest of the globe if we need to change anything. But it is moving slowly in that case.
We have a question here about cost. What is the typical per item cellular subscription cost? With thousands of devices, that seems like it could add up pretty quickly.
Sure, and this is Evan. I assume that's for me, so I'll address that one. It really depends. It really depends. A lot of it is depending on how much data you're looking to send. In the IoT space in general, and this is also true in the healthcare space, solutions can range from devices sending data as low as the hundreds of kilobytes per month. But we also see devices that can exceed, get into the gigabytes per month range. That's really the main driver for the cellular subscription costs. Most models, it's typically on a per device basis. And so if there's a lot of factors that play into that. But if you do have any specific, if you'd like for us to give you a quote, we'd be happy to do that. You can reach out to sales@aeris.net with your information, and one of our reps would be happy to get back to you and provide, based on your specific requirements, just a proposal on what we could do for you. So again, a little tough to answer, generally because it can change again based on usage, but we'd be happy to provide more information if you reach out.
All right. Another question for you, Evan. What cellular technology is the best choice for the U.S. and/or global? Okay.
Yeah, great question. And so I'll kind of expand on what I had talked about just a minute ago on the 2G. By saying that in the U.S., 2G radios are probably not what you want to go with, especially given that one major network has already been shut down, and the other one is expected to sometime within the next 3, 4, 5 years or so, again, pending official confirmation from T-Mobile. So 2G only may not be what you're looking for, but a lot of it does depend on how long your devices need to be out in the field. We've seen everything from specific solutions that device you may need to be out there for only a couple years. If that's the case, then maybe a 2G or a 3G connection is going to be just fine for you. 3G is expected to be around in the U.S. for a couple more years after 2G. But probably if you've got a device that needs to be out in the field for anything longer than 5 to 7 years or so, you probably want to start looking at some sort of combination of incorporating LTE, 4G into that. Obviously, 4G is the latest and greatest technology that's come out from a cellular standpoint, and is expected to be around for a while, so the next 15, 20 years. If you've got a device that needs to be out in the field or deployed or somewhere for 10 plus years, that's certainly the technology you should probably want to look into. And there are additional abilities to combine. You know, a 4G radio that has 3G fallback, for example, is certainly a route that many customers and many solution providers are going. When you look at the rest of the world, again, as I had mentioned, there isn't quite the same amount of pressure to switch to 4G networks because the 2G and 3G networks are expected to be around a little bit longer. So, you know, a bit of that is region specific, but generally a fairly safe statement. But you know, even there, I won't get too much into the complications of global LTE, although there are some specifically on the hardware. You know, in the GSM world, fortunately, the bands or that the global operators have deployed on, or the spectrum, is common across the world. In LTE, that's not the case, and so it becomes a bit difficult to map that out from a radio compatibility standpoint. But again, I won't go too deep into that now, but do know that global LTE right now it can be a bit of a challenge, but one that we're addressing. And again, if you'd like more information specific to your solution or plans or locations you'd like to go, those are questions certainly that we can answer for you one-on-one if you reach out. So.
All right. Well, thank you, Evan Whitelock and Jesper Hassel, for taking the time to share your expertise with us today. So I'd like to thank you guys, and thanks, of course, to everyone who joined us today. I'd like to ask you to please be sure to complete the evaluation that will be popping up on your screen. Share your feedback with us. And just a reminder that today's session will be available on demand until August 4th. Thanks again to everyone, and have a great day.